Welcome to your personalized deep dive on mastering fluent English. We've got a stack of research and expert advice ready to help you level up your English speaking skills. And the best part is no textbooks involved. We're ditching the stuffy classroom vibes and focusing on practical tips and strategies you can actually use. Think of it like building fluency as a habit, just like you learned your first language.
It is fascinating how babies just soak up language, isn't it? They don't even know what grammar is, but they become fluent speakers naturally. It's
Yeah.
all about consistent exposure and interaction.
That's a great point. It makes you realize that maybe we overcomplicate things as adults. But before we get into the how-to, let's talk about why fluency matters to you.
Fluency can truly open doors to so many opportunities. Delivering killer presentations at work, traveling the world with confidence, connecting with people from different cultures. It all becomes easier when you can communicate effectively in English.
I've definitely experienced that firsthand. It's amazing how much more confident and connected you feel when you can express yourself clearly. So how do we tap into that childlike ability to learn language? Where do we even begin?
One of the most powerful strategies is to surround yourself with English as much as possible. It's like creating an immersion experience, right, in your own life.
So instead of booking a plane ticket, we're bringing the English-speaking world to us. I like it.
Right.
But how exactly do we do that?
Think about the things you already enjoy doing and find ways to incorporate English into them. For instance, if you love movies, start watching them with English subtitles. You can even try watching a scene with subtitles, then without, and then again with them, to see how much you pick up each time.
That's actually a really clever technique. I never thought about watching a scene multiple times like that. It's almost like a game trying to catch new words each time.
Exactly. And don't forget about podcasts and audiobooks. You can listen while you commute, work out, or even do chores around the house.
It's amazing how much learning you can fit into those little pockets of time throughout the day. And speaking of sneaking in some extra practice,
Here's one you might not have considered. Change your phone's language settings to English.
now that is thinking outside the box. It's like a constant low-key English lesson every time you check your phone. But while listening is super important, we also need to practice actually speaking, right?
Absolutely. Listening is a great foundation, but to become truly fluent, we need to get comfortable with producing the language ourselves. And don't worry, we're not talking about giving speeches just yet.
I think we can all breathe a sigh of relief about that.
Yeah.
But seriously, what are some practical ways to practice speaking without feeling overwhelmed?
One of the simplest and most effective methods is talking to yourself. And I'm serious. Describe what you're doing, what you're thinking, anything that comes to mind.
Okay, full disclosure. I've tried this before, and I definitely felt a little silly at first. Did you ever experience that?
Well, absolutely. In the beginning, it can feel a bit awkward, but trust me, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. It's all about getting those words flowing and building confidence.
That makes sense. It's like anything else, the more you practice, the less self-conscious you become. And it's not like anyone else is listening, so who cares if you make a few mistakes?
Exactly. Mistakes are part of the learning process. What's important is getting those vocal cords working and forming sentences in English. But for those who crave a bit more interaction, joining a language exchange group can be a game changer. There are tons of apps like Tandem or HelloTalk that connect you with native speakers and other learners.
It's like having a built-in language buddy to practice with and keep you motivated.
And don't forget the power of the shadowing technique. This is where you listen to a short audio clip and try to repeat it word for word, mimicking the speaker's pronunciation tone and even their pauses.
It's kind of like karaoke for language learning. I can see how this could be a fun way to work on pronunciation. Now, I know I tend to get hung up on wanting to sound perfect, which can sometimes hold me back from speaking.
That's a really common feeling. But remember, fluency is not about perfection. It's about effective communication. If you forget a specific word, don't let that stop you. Use the words you do know to get your point across. For instance, if you can't remember the word umbrella, you could say, the thing you use when it's raining.
Right. It's more about being understood than sounding like a walking dictionary. So how do we expand our vocabulary without resorting to boring flashcards?
Think about the things you're passionate about and start reading about them in English, whether it's articles, books, blogs, or even social media posts. The key is to engage with content you find interesting.
I love that. It's like learning disguised as leisure. It doesn't even feel like studying when you're enjoying what you're reading.
Right.
So what are some other strategies for making vocabulary building more enjoyable?
Instead of just memorizing individual words, try learning them in context. So instead of just run, learn phrases like run out of time or run errands. This will help you understand how words are actually used in everyday conversations.
That's such a practical tip. It's like building your vocabulary toolbox with ready-to-use phrases.
And here's a classic that still holds up. Keep a vocabulary journal. It might seem old school, but it's incredibly effective.
I'm all about trying out classic techniques. What's the best way to use a vocabulary journal?
Jot down new words or phrases you encounter, write down their definitions and example sentences, and even try using them in your own sentences.
So it's not just about writing down the definition, it's about actively engaging with the word and making it your own.
Exactly. You can even personalize your journal with little sketches or diagrams to help you remember the words better. The key is to make it fun and engaging. Now, we've covered a lot of ground on expanding your vocabulary, but there's another essential piece of the fluency puzzle we need to address: pronunciation.
That's right. Even with a great vocabulary, if your pronunciation isn't clear, it can be difficult for people to understand you. So how do we tackle pronunciation without feeling intimidated?
You don't need to sound exactly like a native speaker, but aiming for clear and understandable pronunciation can make a world of difference.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about making sure your message gets across clearly, not necessarily erasing your accent entirely. So what are some effective ways to improve our pronunciation?
Well, thankfully, technology has given us some amazing tools. There are apps like ELSA Speak or Youglish that provide real-time feedback on your pronunciation and even pinpoint specific sounds you might need to work on. It's like having a personal pronunciation coach right in your pocket.
Those sound incredibly helpful. I'll definitely have to check those out. But what about those times when you don't have your phone handy? Are there any techniques we can use to practice pronunciation on our own?
Absolutely. One effective method is to break down words into their individual sounds, paying close attention to things like stress and intonation. For example, the word record is pronounced differently depending on whether it's a noun or a verb. The stress shifts, and that changes the pronunciation.
Oh, wow. I actually never realized that about the word record. It's amazing how subtle shifts in pronunciation can completely change the meaning of a word.
It's true. And these nuances are what make English pronunciation so fascinating and sometimes tricky. But with practice, you can start to recognize and master these subtle differences. And speaking of practice, have you ever tried tongue twisters?
Of course. Who hasn't stumbled over "she sells seashells by the seashore" at some point in their life? But are they really that helpful for pronunciation?
They might seem silly, but tongue twisters are incredibly effective for improving articulation and fluency. They force you to pay attention to the specific sounds and movements of your mouth, which can help you pronounce words more clearly.
So it's like a workout for your tongue. I'm game to give some tongue twisters a try. Do you have a favorite one?
Let's see. How about this one? Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Give it a go.
Peter Piper picked. Oh my goodness, this is harder than it looks.
Yeah.
But it is kind of fun. I can see how regularly practicing tongue twisters could really make a difference.
Exactly. And remember, it's all about having fun while you learn. If you're enjoying the process, you're more likely to stick with it.
I completely agree. When you're having fun, learning feels effortless. It's like that feeling of getting lost in a good book. You're completely absorbed and enjoying the experience.
That's a great analogy, and it applies to language learning as well. The more you immerse yourself in the experience, the more natural and enjoyable it becomes.
So true. It's not about forcing yourself to study for hours on end, but rather finding ways to integrate English into your everyday life in a way that feels fun and engaging.
Exactly. Speaking of which, we've covered a lot of tips and strategies today, from immersion to pronunciation. Before we move on to resources that can help you on your journey, I want to emphasize one key point. Fluency is not a destination, it's a journey.
That is such an important reminder. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of reaching some mythical level of perfection, but the reality is that language learning is an ongoing process.
Absolutely. It takes time, effort, and consistent practice. Don't get discouraged if you don't see results overnight. Celebrate the small wins, be patient with yourself, and most importantly, keep practicing.
I love that. Celebrate the small wins. It's so easy to focus on what we haven't mastered yet, but acknowledging our progress, no matter how small, can be incredibly motivating.
Exactly. Every new word you learn, every conversation you have in English, every time you push yourself outside of your comfort zone, those are all victories worth celebrating.
Well said. And now that we're feeling inspired and motivated, let's talk about some resources that can support you on your fluency journey. We've touched on apps like Tandem and HelloTalk for finding language partners, but what other apps would you recommend?
When it comes to apps for daily practice, Duolingo, Babbel, and Memrise are all excellent choices. They make learning fun and interactive with bite-sized lessons and gamified challenges. And for those who prefer learning through authentic content, FluentU is a fantastic option. It uses real-world videos like movie clips, music videos, and news segments to teach English in a way that's both engaging and effective.
Fluent U sounds fascinating. I love the idea of learning through real-world content. It's so much more interesting and relevant than traditional textbooks. And speaking of traditional resources, are there any websites or books you'd recommend?
BBC Learning English is a classic resource for high-quality lessons and materials. It's a great place to find podcasts, videos, grammar explanations, and even interactive exercises.
BBC Learning English. A trusted source, for sure. What about books? Any recommendations for those who prefer a good old-fashioned page-turner?
The Elements of Style by Strunk and White is a must-have for anyone looking to improve their grammar and writing skills. It's a classic for a reason.
The Elements of Style. A true classic. It's been on my reading list for ages. But I also love your point about choosing books that genuinely interest you. It doesn't have to be a grammar textbook.
Exactly. Any book that captures your imagination and keeps you turning pages is a valuable tool for language learning. The key is to find something you enjoy reading.
That's such great advice. Soaking up English through books, movies, podcasts, it's all about finding those enjoyable avenues for learning that fit into your everyday life.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us back to our earlier discussion about babies learning language. They don't see it as a chore. They see it as a way to connect with the world around them.
It's like we're rewiring our brains to see language learning not as a chore, but as a key to unlocking new experiences and connections.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective can make all the difference.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into mastering fluent English, what's one final piece of advice you'd give to our listener who's eager to embark on this journey?
Embrace the journey and enjoy the ride. It's okay to make mistakes. In fact, mistakes are proof that you're learning and growing.
I love that reframing of mistakes. Instead of seeing them as setbacks, we can view them as opportunities for growth.
Absolutely. Celebrate your progress no matter how small. And remember, patience and persistence are key.
So true. Fluency doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process that unfolds over time with consistent effort and a positive attitude.
And don't forget the power of connecting with others who are on the same journey. Join language exchange groups, attend meetups, or simply strike up conversations with English speakers whenever you get the chance.
That's a great point. Surrounding yourself with a supportive community can make the learning process so much more enjoyable and rewarding.
Well said. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought-provoking question. As you embark on your fluency journey, how can you tap into that childlike sense of curiosity and playfulness to make your English learning more enjoyable and effective?
That's a powerful question. It's about rediscovering that joy of exploration and not taking ourselves too seriously.
Exactly. Remember, learning a language is an adventure, not a chore. So embrace the journey, have fun with it, and watch your fluency soar.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's a wrap on our deep dive into mastering fluent English. We hope you're feeling inspired and empowered to continue your language learning adventure. Until next time, keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep those conversations flowing.